if the digital marketing company is we're taking our tackle box and we're taking our fishing rod and we're going to this pond that we're going to look for leads for Paul's servicing company for, we throw our line out there and we're just going to, get him the most cost-effective leads that we can get him. Just keep fishing them out. What that means is the size of the pond has shrunken.
All right, Matt, we are back.
We are indeed.
I think today, as I said last week, I thought it would be a good opportunity for you to give us an update. Now that we're September, I think it'd be a great opportunity for you to kind of give us a high-level overview of what you're seeing kind of search volume-wise out there in the resi services space.
Yep. Lizard has been growing pretty substantially, right? Really crazy clip. We're about to hire, bringing on more help to tackle more clients that are starting to work with us, which is fantastic, right?
Okay.
Love it. I love this particular portion of it. But what that also gives us insight into as a digital marketing company that specifically provides digital marketing services for resi service companies across the United States and sometimes out of the United States, is analysis as to what's going on with demand across the country, really. Mm-hmm. We had some banner years. Honestly, most service industries had banner years when we were in the pandemic, which it sounds like, it feels, in some respects, it feels like forever ago, but it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
2023 was when we started to kind of come out of our hermit crab shells and get back out into the world, right? 2022 was when the pandemic was officially over, right? During those years, though, we saw these incredible spikes because people were stuck at home and they were looking at their problems all the time, right? But now, a couple of things, there's a couple dynamics that we can see from the digital marketing perspective that we're kind of keeping a close eye on with all these partners that we work with so that we can help them manage their expectations. Because Paul, the CEO of Paul's PR service company, doesn't need to be a marketing expert, but he does need to be able to trust his marketing experts, right? Mm-hmm. And so as we try to manage their expectations, we're noticing two things. The first one is that demand has shrunken a little bit more naturally down to the size it was before the pandemic, which is when things shut up, right? So what we're seeing are more normal numbers, right? Than what we were seeing during the pandemic. Those are abnormal numbers. And a lot of clients that we've worked with based their future projection on those abnormal numbers.
Of course.
And they're not uniquely happy. They didn't take our advice and manage their expectations, and they're not uniquely happy with some of the results that they've gotten because their numbers were inflated, right? But then here's what's really like challenging, and it's tough to talk about. As the income provider for my family, me and Katie have these conversations all the time, which is, when things are tight, when the economy is what it is currently, especially in the United States, and it is as expensive as it's ever been to head to the grocery store and to do some of the basic stuff, right? All of a sudden we went from having a real comfortable situation with three high school kids to having to make like healthier food compromises with things that may stretch the dollar out a little bit further. Because every time we go to the grocery store, it's like $300, right? At least. And that's sometimes twice a week, but it's definitely once a week, you know?
I did notice your children look thinner. I saw Leo and, of course, your son.
Fair.
Both of them look thinner than they used to be. So,
listen,
is that just because they're growing so quickly, or what?
I don't know what's happening. We went to the doctor's office yesterday with Elliot. He's in that like 84th percentile for height. He's already taller than me. He's 14, right?
Shocking. Yeah.
So we can't get him to go wide. He just keeps going tall, right? We're trying, and he eats like it's nobody's business. But especially with three teenagers in the house, they're metabolizing crap constantly. And so we are trying to dump it in. But as we go through these, seasons of economic hardship, consumers are having to make much more frugal decisions with who they're doing business with and how often. Some of the services that the service industry provides are we need to remember their luxuries, right? I'll give you an example from HVAC. A maintenance program on your heating and air unit is a luxury that you will gladly dismiss when it's $300 at the grocery store and $80 to fill up my car, right? Same thing is true for lawn care. I'm not going to spend, $1,200, $2,400 to get my Kentucky fescue to be at 4 inches and aerate and overseed this year because I am struggling, right? And same thing for pest control, and all of the kind of annual contracts that come with that. We are noticing across the country that consumers are starting to pull back. So those are the two factors that we're seeing across the board. Numbers are normalizing because we're leaving the pandemic. Every step we take out of the pandemic, those numbers will be more normal. But also until our economy changes, and God, it needs to change, consumers are having to make real tough decisions with how they spend their money.
Yeah. Clearly, budgets are getting tighter. And as you said, things have never been this expensive. So there's trade-offs, right? And I think we're seeing that, when you look at some of the earnings reports from Walmart, for example, and for companies like, the dollar store, we're starting to see these sorts of trade-offs. So we now are in more of a normalized market with regard to search volume for resi services. Well, I guess, what are some of the implications for like a pest control company, for example? Like if in my market there was typically 20,000 searches a day for my particular service, and now there's half of that. I mean, what does that mean for me? Is it my advertising costs go up, or how do I have to look at that?
Such a good question. So we met with a partner that we care about very much. Love this family business, right? Met with them last week. Since coming on board with us, we built them a brand new website, right? Anytime you build a brand new website, there are natural consequences for organic search traffic to this new website as you try to refamiliarize Google with your website, as opposed to their website that they had before, which was about 3 years old, right? They had put lots of content on there, tracked lots of information. So
same URL? Is it a website on the same URL? Okay. So basically, Google's looking at this now as almost like you've got the age of the domain, which Google will recognize and say, okay, this thing has been around for a few years, but it's all new content. And so in some ways, is Google looking at that as a brand new website?
Yep. So you know how Google has that car that goes down the street that takes a picture of the road?
Yes.
Same thing is true when Google crawls your website. Companies like mine force Google to take its Google car and pass by your website and take a new picture of your website. That's what it means when we do site audits for our companies. We're getting Google to crawl their website. We force Google to drive by your house, right?
Okay.
And when you do a new website, the address for on the lot where your home exists is the same, your website, right? That's the same. But Google passes and is like, wait a minute, that's not the same one that it was the last time I was here, right? That's a different building on that same lot at that same address. That's what your website is. Your website is your digital brick and mortar. So when you do a new website, you are scraping out that old house, which is the one that Google is familiar with, and you're plopping a new house on there, which Google's going to have to refamiliarize itself with. So that is kind of what started the conversation with this company, right? Okay. They're noticing they're not getting their conversion costs are fantastic. They just want more leads, and they can't figure out why they're not getting them. It turned out it had a lot to do with their baby website wasn't pulling the same kind of weight. It's not old enough yet to pull the same kind of weight that their previous website was pulling. But then, after kind of going down this trail with them, we jumped into the Keyword Planner inside of Google, which is the tool that we use as a digital marketing company to determine search trends so that we can build our strategies around those trends, right? We jumped into the Keyword Planner to look at his geographic, his zip codes that he services, this family services specifically. And we found in his market alone, I won't say which market, but if somebody's listening to this, I'm sure they've noticed something similar, right? But we found in his market that pest control near me was down 58% over the last 3 months. Right.
Wow.
Pest control near me was down 58%. Termite help and exterminator near me were down 88 and 89% respectively.
And this is summer months, basically. These are the busiest months.
Exactly. So we're still in August. These are August numbers that we're looking at. So here's what that means to answer your question. If the digital marketing company is we're taking our tackle box and we're taking our fishing rod and we're going to this pond that we're going to look for leads for Paul's servicing company for, we throw our line out there and we're just going to, get him the most cost effective leads that we can get him. Just keep fishing them out. What that means is the size of the pond has shrunken. Right? That's what it means when demand slips the way that it has recently. The number of people that are searching has diminished. And so what that means for your cost is the cost to get the fish that are in the pond is going to go up a little bit.
Now, I hope he gets this fish, because he ain't going to catch no more out there flopping around like a mud cat on a trout line. You see what I'm saying here?
We were really fortunate with this particular partner that our conversion costs were so far underneath what they were paying at their previous digital marketing agency. Thank God.
Yeah.
But you could see in his July report and his June report that the acquisition cost was rising as the size of the pond was shrinking. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because we have to fight harder to get those leads when there's less people searching for them. And to go back to what we were talking about at the beginning, they're searching less because the economy is getting much more difficult. Numbers are getting more normal. People are going back to work and people are living a life, and they'll get home and they'll be too tired to handle their stuff at home, or they'll wait for the weekend and try to do it themselves or something like that. But also when it is $80 to fill up my car and it is $300 to go to the grocery store at a $5 carton of milk, I've got to make different decisions as a consumer. And so that pond shrinks, right? And so the price for getting those fish goes up.
I paid $21 for a loaf of sourdough bread yesterday in Puerto Rico.
What?
$21 for a loaf of bread.
That is some Ethiopian, like Addis Ababa level inflation. Why was it so expensive?
Puerto Rico is ridiculously expensive. Like, I don't think people don't realize that, I lived in Geneva, Switzerland for years, and I moved to Puerto Rico, and my cost of living is actually dramatically higher than Geneva, Switzerland. And everyone always looks at the most expensive cities in the world report, and Geneva is usually in the top 3. Sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 3. Switzerland's expensive. You haven't been to Puerto Rico yet. Yeah, it's ridiculous. So
yes. When the economy struggles, cost of goods go up. And then consumers like me and you have to be like, okay, do I need this $21 loaf of sourdough? Or can I just get some Dave's Dave's white bread and be fine with that?
Yeah. I was already at the register. On principle, I didn't want to ever pay $21 for a loaf of bread, but I was already at the register.
You don't want to be like... That's a little bit vanity right there. You don't want to be like, no, put that back.
No, I did say 21. It's like, you've got to be, but I just couldn't do it. So I bought it.
God, that's incredible. Good for you. I hope it tastes amazing.
I put a ribeye on there and some cheese and onion. It made a nice steak sandwich. It was fantastic.
Awesome. Bravo.
I know before we talked a lot about benchmarking against yourself, right? Where you want to see constant incremental improvement over time, which for me is the core way to do it. Like, I don't think people should worry so much about what their competitors are doing, and they should really focus on constant improvement in their own metrics. So that, I think, remains fundamental. But you guys over at Lizard have a lot of data, right? You've got a ton of clients across the country in a variety of different service industries. And it's very helpful, I think, for somebody to say, well, wait a second. I'm in Atlanta. This guy's in Charlotte. Here's what he's paying, cost of conversion and all that. Why is mine different? What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? So let's get into that. Talk to me about benchmarking.
So one of the first benchmarks that you're going to want to keep an eye on, in particular when times are harder, is your customer acquisition cost, right? When that pool of water gets smaller, your customer acquisition cost is naturally going to rise. And don't let that freak you out, right? find a threshold that you're comfortable with where you're still making money and you are, still growing the size of your company, right? And keep an eye on that line that you're not willing to cross. But just know that as the pool around that we're all fishing from shrinks, that cost is going to go up.
Okay.
The customer that kind of triggered that complicated phone call yesterday regarding some of the things that we were finding about their new website and demand in their area and all that kind of stuff. They are the best. They are my favorite, actually, at knowing at the drop of a hat their customer acquisition cost. When I was at anticimex, Michael Vignier, I think, was the CEO of North America at the time.
Actually, he was Michael Johansson when you started.
Michael Johansson. I remember that you said that.
And then he became Michael Vignier, yeah.
That's right. That's right. That's crazy. I mean, it's not crazy. To each their own, whatever. But he was huge on knowing the customer acquisition cost, being able to pull that out of your pocket at a moment's notice. Your digital marketing company needs the help of the business owner to find that number, because we can tell you how much it costs to make the lead, but we don't know how many leads you're closing all the time.
Right.
And so you've got to help us find that number. But that company, their customer acquisition cost with us right now in the month of August, which is when the report that we just reviewed, was $157. They're basically converting every other lead that we send to them, right? Their closing ratio is about 50%. But then I'm looking at, they were kind enough to show me a report from their previous digital marketing company, right? And the cost to get the phone to ring or to get the form filled out for that previous digital marketing company was $187. Okay.
Just for the lead.
Just for the lead. So at a 50% closing ratio, that would have made his acquisition cost north of $300, right? And that's why you want to keep an eye on that line, right? This is how much I'm comfortable spending to get a new customer, right? Yeah. But if we go through that or go past that, I need to start either talking to having a hard conversation with my current digital marketing company or talking to another digital marketing company, because this is some bullshit. When I saw his previous report, I was like, bro, my God, we're blowing them out of the water. But geez, your acquisition cost is cheaper than the cost to make the phone ring at your previous digital marketing company. Yeah. That's awesome.
How long have these guys been blowing money prior to this?
3 years they were with their previous marketing company. They've been with us for 9 months. So it hasn't been that long. I want to connect a dot here because this is good. This kind of is happening naturally, which is great. When economic times are getting harsher and you know the line that you're willing to cross to get that customer, what I recommend for the people that are listening to this video, listening to you, Paul, especially as they're thinking about how to grow their company so they can get ready to sell it, is you need to sweeten the pot for the consumer, okay? If you know it's going to cost you a little bit more in a smaller pond when the economy is changing, go ahead and throw in on top of that, keeping an eye on your customer acquisition costs. Go ahead and improve, make a little bit more of a robust promotion that you're going to put on your ads, on your website, on your social media profiles, all that kind of stuff, right? Yeah. Maybe this time last year you were willing to give a person $100 off. Well, shit, times are hard, and you know that if you can get this customer on with you, they're going to stay with you for 5 to 7 years if your service is good, right? Yeah. Go ahead and sweeten that pot to $150. What is $50 on a $7,000 return on investment, right? Yeah. Who cares, right? Yeah. So improve. Right now is a great opportunity for business owners to improve their promotions to get more people. But they've got to know what their customer acquisition cost is so they can know it's costing me too much. This is a line I can't cross, right?
That's a great point, though, you make, because especially, and I see smart companies doing this all the time. Like if you look at the pest control industry, we're in the off season, or we're getting really close to the off season. By the time we get in October, right? And so a lot of times folks will charge like, hey, it's, I don't know, $150 for an initial service, and then you're on a quarterly program thereafter, right? So you pay $150 up front or $200 or whatever. That's the initial. Yeah. And then it's $35 a month or $40 a month. You know, when you get into the off season, you might want to consider waiving the cost for initial. Like you might do a free initial, like, hey, from October to March, we'll do a free initial. So your first service is free, provided you sign up to a general home protection plan, for example. Yes. That's a great thing to do because lock them up on the contract.
Yeah. You care about when you're ready to talk to Paul and sell your company, you care about how many contracts that you have.
That's right.
And at that moment, you're not going to be quibbling about $50 that you lost or $150 that you lost to waive that initial, right?
Nope.
Get them, right?
Yep.
You care about the long-term financial commitment to your company. That's what you care about.
Yeah.
Conversion rate's the next one. We talk about that a lot. So we don't have to unpack that one too much, but how many people are browsing the merchandise versus buying the merchandise? That's your conversion rate. Okay. That's getting the phone to ring or the form to get filled out versus how many people clicked on your ad or made it to your website and didn't make a buying decision. You want to keep an eye on that. But then return on ad spend. This is a great one. Truthfully, if you don't want to, because this one's, we could really kind of land close to now, but the return on ad spend that we've been able to produce for some of our partners that are all in on digital marketing and trusting and want to work with us and show up at the meetings and are willing to navigate the challenges of a shrinking demand and pivoting to new strategies and all that kind of stuff. The return that our clients are getting with us is pretty fascinating right now, and that's something that you measure as you are also understanding your acquisition costs. So let's say, for example, I can give you real numbers. Yeah. I've got one company that works for us, and I love them. I'm going to give you a shout out right now, Nate Sorensen. You know I love you. They're one of the very rare times, because a lot of people have PTSD with digital marketing companies, and it's rightfully so. Mm-hmm. I've never had an experience like that. And so I'm really naive. My digital marketing company was Mike Pinkney here in Charlotte, and I love him. Okay. We're going to get lunch tomorrow. Shout out Mike. But, and that was my 11-year experience with Killingsworth and anticimex. And I think that they're still working with him. Right. But a lot of people come to us with a lot of PTSD, but not Nate. Nate showed up and he was like, I like you guys. We've got a good vibe. What do we need to do? And we made the forecast for them. We stuck to the forecast. In the first year that he spent with us, first calendar year, 12 months, these are his numbers. He invested, this included all of our fees, our percentages, and all of his paid search budget, all of the work that he did on his brand new website and optimizing that website, all that stuff. He spent $323,000 with Lizard, okay, when he started in those first 12 months. When he started working with us, he was at $1.7 million in annual revenue, okay. At the end of those 12 months, he had grown that company to $4.5 million in 12 months, just on the back of digital marketing. Like, that's it, right? His return on investment was 4.01 times return on investment.
So let's talk about how you calculate that. So what goes into that equation? So I would imagine the denominator is your total ad spend. What's the numerator?
The new contracts through sales that were created based upon this ad spend. So you've got to have your house in order, right? Your CRM's got to be grabbing the lead from us. And when you're plugging it in to, create a lead in Service Titan or in Field Routes or whatever, right? You're tracking it all the way until it gets put on a schedule and the money gets collected at the end of the month. And so that's the numerator, right? When you are looking at all of the money that was added, that you billed for, according to services that are associated with all of your digital marketing leads, right? So paid search, local service ads, Google AdWords, Google Business Profile, website form fills, website, all those things, right? They're all sourced independently and they all create these jobs, and somebody's collecting on that money. How much money did you collect based on how much you invested, right? That's what's giving you the return on investment. And they grew in those 12 months, it's 4 times, which is ridiculous.
And that's based on the incremental new customers, right? Because I could see somebody listening to this and saying, well, Matt, in August, I did $100,000 in total revenue and I spent $5K on marketing. So my return is 20X. But that's not actually the case, because in that particular example, it was $100,000 in total revenue. And what you're actually saying is using your CRM to say, okay, you got to track what your incremental new. So let's use that same example again. Let's say in August, I had an incremental 10K in new revenue. So it was 90 was my recurring base, and I got 10K in new revenue. and it took me 5,000 in ad spend to get that, my return would have been 2x, right?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to be clear there, because anytime we talk about equations on here, I know there's 50 different ways to look at things, and I've gotten some questions from people.
And the truth is, in some respects, you have to look at it in 50 different ways.
Yeah.
You truly do. Because some of the companies that you want to get into an onion of nuance, some of the companies, the majority of the companies that we work with that aren't ready to get to talk to Paul to sell their company are still cash-based, right?
Yeah.
Well, you realize revenue differently when you're a cash-based company versus when you're an accrual company, right?
Very much.
And when you're preparing to go towards an accrual company, you have to understand your cost per acquisition and your return on ad spend differently, right? And so that's a very good point. Just because you have to look at something a couple different ways doesn't mean you shouldn't look at it a couple different ways. It means that you need to benchmark both. You really do, right? Because what you're looking at is the benchmarks, right? You're looking at a trend like the stock market, right? Sometimes it's going to rise, sometimes it's going to fall, but you always want it to move in this nice, steady slope up, which is an indication that your business is growing, right?
We tend to look at numbers that are very similar to that in our capacity here in valuation and M&A. A very plain vanilla statistic is effectively your marketing and advertising as a percentage of total revenue. And, depending upon what industry segment you're in and how quickly you're growing, sometimes that's somewhere between 2 and 10%. On the pest control side, we tend to see that around 5 or 6% of revenue. On lawn care side, it's a little bit more expensive, but not a whole lot, maybe a couple hundred basis points. Another metric that I tend to look at significantly is when we see aberrations in advertising, marketing and advertising spend. So let me give you an example. If I look at a pest control business that instead of spending 5 or 6% per year on marketing and advertising is spending 10%, but the top line doesn't seem to be growing much greater than kind of the industry average, I start to say, well, are we blowing cash on advertising? That leads me to the next question, which is kind of a yield number. And here's what I mean by that. If in 2023, just as an example, a company went from 1 million to 1.5 million in revenue. So they added 500K in revenue, right? Incremental growth in 2023 on the top line was 500K, right?
Yep.
How much did you spend in advertising and marketing in order to get that 500K? And so it's really the total year incremental growth in revenue divided by the total advertising and marketing spend for the year. And hell, good companies should be at 3x, 4x numbers, right? 5x, you've seen 6x, depending on how efficient guys are. But when you're, when it takes you, when you've got to spend 300,000 in marketing and advertising to get an incremental increase of 500K in total revenue, that's not a good yield number on advertising and marketing. So you can take a step back and really look at what you're doing. When I went through this on an Ask Me Anything, we do the monthly AMAs with the fraction clients. And I did an AMA on how we actually calculate that and why it makes sense for us to look at it and why business owners should look at it. So maybe in the future, I'll do what I did for the fraction clients, which was a private kind of Ask Me Anything session, and we'll do it on here, and I can walk through what I look like, what we look at, as opposed to what you guys look at on the actual digital marketing side, what I look at on the valuation and M&A side, and how it might compare to what acquirers would be looking at.
100%, I'm on that page. And Michael, anticimex even took it a step further than that as well.
Yeah.
Not just realizing actual revenue, they also had us to kind of further that same equation, go one step further and say, okay, what is our attrition and retention right now?
Yes.
How long are we keeping these? And therefore, how much revenue have we brought to the company over the course of the next 5 years, right?
100%.
A lead that I bring you, Paul, for your service industry and PR, it's not just the money that you'll realize in that first year. My goal is to get the conversion cost as low as I can possibly get it with the highest quality score of that lead as possible so that your sales team can knock it right out of the park and get those guys onto the books, right? If I've done that, then you have realized revenue for that new client in your first year, right? If I'm doing a good job, right? But also that next year you realize all of that revenue minus your, all of your COGS, without any marketing expense for the next 4 to 5 years, right? So that's where the real value of your company grows. And that's where your multiples start to go a little bonkers from a mergers and acquisitions perspective.
You're right. And I just gave an example, one bro math example. I mean, other ways to do this is, we do the same sort of analysis. Instead of using revenue, we use gross profit. So the incremental increase in gross profit, which gross profit now takes into consideration your pricing as well as your route density, right? So how much am I spending on advertising and marketing for each incremental dollar of gross margin, which is actually a more important number than revenue. And then on top of that, you can actually tie it down to either revenue or gross margin associated only with recurring accounts. Because if you're trying to build value in a recurring service business, who gives two shits if you're doing a bunch of one-times? You spend a lot of money on, you're bringing in a lot of revenue, but it's all one-time. So let's make these ratios with regard to recurring revenue as opposed to just total revenue. So, we can get really deep into the weeds. The example I gave before was just kind of this giant bro math catch-all calculation, but we'll do some more of that.
Like we said earlier, I think it's important to look at it from multiple different perspectives. Keep your benchmarks and be consistent about keeping these benchmarks as you walk forward so that you can see the impacts of a shrinking or expanding market, see the impacts of people having more money or less money in their pocket, and find those thresholds, particularly that customer acquisition cost. Where is your line? What is the line you're not willing to step over in terms of your acquisition costs and the lifetime value of that client? How far are you willing to go to get that person on board with you for the next 5 to 7 years, right? If you can keep an eye on those benchmarks, you're going to be in good shape.
I want to close this episode here asking you an important question. So if folks are out there and they're not using Lizard or a sophisticated digital marketing firm, how can they find, is there somewhere to look to get even some general benchmarks so that a guy like me could get on Google Analytics and say, okay, here's what I'm doing. What are some standard industry benchmarks of what's going on in general that I can compare my company to? Where could I get that sort of data?
One great place to get that data is you can look into a tool called SEMrush, which is like our bread and butter. There's lesser tools that are going to give you less sophisticated information, but SEMrush has been around and it's pretty tried and true when it comes to finding the kind of KPIs that'll give you industry averages in your geographic region. Okay,
Gotcha.
That's a great tool that you can look at. It's going to take some exploring. If you're doing it without the help of a digital marketing company that you trust, it's going to take you some time to understand what the hell it is that you're looking at when you get in there, because it gives a lot of data. And there's a reason that digital marketing companies get paid to do this, because you as the business owner shouldn't have to hold all of this information inside you. When you look at, when you go over to Spread, I want you to go over to SEMrush after you jump off ball so you can see it can get pretty hairy in there. But that's the best tool, I think.
That's SEMrush.com.
SEMrush, SEMrush.com.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that's helpful.
That's like the go-to for us.
I'm going to do it. Next week, I'll report back.
All right.
All right, brother.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, buddy.
Take care. Bye-bye.